I like that the game has a clearly defined gameplay loop.
Well, I don't know. I don't like the concept of selling because essentially you sell and then what?
That is, we kind of have a content limitation that quickly leads to a sense of uniformity and lack of content.
So friends, today we are reviewing Idle Pet Shop. It's quite an interesting game that we didn't buy for $1 million, but for a pittance, roughly speaking, for 100, 200 euro. We definitely bought the source code and now we absolutely want to do something better with this project. Why do we want to make it better? Because we have IPs with which we can do similar things. And we know that this game has many weaknesses. We will strengthen these weaknesses since Zoryana is ready. Turn on the screen sharing and let's go.
Hello everyone, I'm very glad to see and hear you all today. Today we are analyzing our game in detail, so I will show you the actual procurement process that goes into it, what we do there, and how we procure everything needed. But I will keep this intrigue for a little later. First, let's look at one of the main classic competitors, classic idle games. My Mini Mart by Supersonic. Let's take a closer look at some of the screenshots they have provided. These images will help us understand their work and the progress they have made. Everything is in the same color scheme, not flashy, in tonal pastel shades. Probably the only thing I like about the graphics is these tones, how they are chosen. The only thing is that one picture, in my opinion, stands out. But this is something the ASO specialist can say whether it's good or bad. Most likely, if it passed A/B testing, as Oleg likes, then it fits well. And let's take a look at where their traffic comes from. I remind you that this traffic I am showing includes organic traffic. This does not mean they are buying traffic from India. Most likely it might have come to them organically. Here is a row of Latam, there is Vietnam, and in 5th place there are the United States. 79,000 for, let me tell you, for what period of time? This is for the last 30 days. And let's look at the creatives, what our competitors have, and where they are buying according to AppMagic. And what we have here for the last 90 days. We see that YouTube is in 1st place, Facebook in 2nd. And then we have a bit of Mintegral and Unity, which is very interesting to me, because our statistics are a bit different, and our network systems work exceptionally well indeed, very well indeed. But look, YouTube definitely works well because there are long videos and it is at the top here. Let's look at it. What's so interesting here? We won't watch it here, but instead we'll watch what they just made, which is a cut combined into 1 minute. It's probably circulating on YouTube and performing well, gaining a lot of views and likes. I really want to see the end, how they did it, even without the pack shot and end card, which are usually included. This is the kind of gameplay creative that you often find on YouTube. Yes, this is the kind of gameplay creative that really stands out and captures attention. Notice that here everywhere is video, that is, they don't have a playable end card, as we saw in our previous competitors. I don't see playbill added anywhere at the moment. I mean, currently I don't see it. Okay. And let's take a look at this thing in more detail. I want to look at the charts and analyze the data to see when they started making purchases in stores, on Android, and to understand the trends and patterns over time, and whether they have any drops in their purchasing behavior on the Android platform or if the charts are steady. And look, what an extremely fascinating story. They started buying traffic in December 2021. They boosted the traffic significantly. The highest peak was in April. And now they have reached a kind of plateau where they are still consistent. That is very stable, you see, from December to today. According to AppMagic, the traffic is very stable. They are not boosting it anymore. It is also interesting why there were some peaks here, maybe because the game was being refined. They released it and now probably just maintaining it. Most likely this is Sasha's game, if I remember correctly. A similar graph pattern called elephant's tail. I also know someone calls this pie, meaning poured traffic here around autumn, somewhere October, November, looking at metrics, what kind of tail from peak poured. All right, let's move on to our incredibly exciting game, where we have a live purchase happening right now.
We don't have any large-scale purchases here. I would say they are rather homeopathic in nature. But nevertheless, however, yes, the game somehow theoretically purchases at a profit. And this is quite strange because there is no game as such, according to the same Sasha. In fact, indeed, actually,
Yes, I would say that this game is still in such a testing stage, but a successful testing stage, because when we started pouring networks, we saw that some countries are going positive. As you can see, we use Tenjin as our MMP. We have thoroughly determined that this particular game should ideally break even at an 85% return on advertising spend on the very first day, which is also known as 0 day. And this is where I'm going to show you visually that we are now purchasing Unity Iron Source. We do not pass any information to Google or Tension. Therefore, you should not rely on this source for any up-to-date or current information. Always check the official sources for the most recent updates and accurate details. So currently, at the moment, we have two main procurement channels, two main sources. And if we start from the same ROAS of day 0, we see that we are hitting the KPI. Iron Source even hits the KPI very well. I remind you that for this game, our KPI is 85%. And based on this, we see that it is important to note that Unity brings us a 0 day of approximately 108%, while Iron Source brings approximately 143%. Right now, we have some changes and optimizations coming to Iron Source. We are scaling it. These tasks are already in progress. And, well, I guess that is really all I actually wanted to show here about Tenjin. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Indeed, feel free to ask.
The only question is that there is a question about AppLovin, but we always have it because the AppLovin SDK is essentially and definitely, absolutely and undoubtedly needed, right?
Yes, we haven't gotten to it yet. We are in the process. Traffic overall, again, Brazil, India. I remind you that this could be organic, purely accidental. We looked at the graphs and screenshots. Let's see where they are buying. Here. And since they have it set up. So, since they most likely have 99.9% AppLovin SDK and AppLovin monetization, which means that almost all of their traffic comes from AppLovin, there is a little from YouTube. Essentially, a significant portion of their traffic is from AppLovin. In other words, almost all of it. And I'll explain why India. I wasn't afraid. I'll explain now why India. We've also noticed this ourselves because AppLovin launches traffic not by the classic tiers we're used to, but in phases. Each phase includes a specific pool of countries. If starting with the classic first phase, which includes, in my opinion, about 18 countries, India is definitely one of the absolutely mandatory ones. At the same time, you can set a high ROAS goal for India, purchasing traffic in India at a profit, or even breaking even. This is done so that they can catch and train Applorin itself and collect more data in order to gather additional valuable information themselves. When this data is collected, you can disable the campaign or India if it's underperforming and add other phases. And the first phase is precisely India, Indonesia, and the Philippines, so I am not surprised by this situation with AppLovin specifically, in particular. So look, everything works on video, but again, we know that AppLovin doesn't launch without interactive end cards. This is a mandatory condition for them, and they help create it themselves. And we found one here. In third place, it's probably this one. So let's look at the first creative that is in the top rankings with the crocodile, which I like the screenshot of at the beginning. Just like in Cyprus by the sea, you arrive and a crocodile catches you.
Thank you. I'm actually coming to Cyprus to the sea.
I hope by the time I arrive, the crocodile will already be full from Denis.
That's it. A very, very simple fail. Fail creative without any talk shot at the end, lasting 25 seconds. It's clear that this creative was on the grid, and let's scroll through. Here's 6 more seconds of the video. It's most likely for YouTube Shorts because YouTube Shorts also bought top with the creative. Here's another one with some kind of ram. I think it's a llama. Ah, it's playable because I'm just shearing the llama, see? Oh, it also turns around. Cool.
But this is definitely not our classic idol, which is more like a set of mini games that we can also think about and enjoy. But we also have other features to consider.
I mentioned that it's a collection of mini games, plus there's a bit of classic idle gameplay. Overall, we're talking about an animal theme. From the screenshots, it seems like this set of mini games is very similar to various ASMR themes, but with a focus on this niche. So yes, we can consider various ASMR types, like the popular trend on TikTok for cleaning horse hooves, for example. Adding this to the game could be interesting. The main thing here is that the process should be super satisfying for the user. Now let's take a look at the graph for a moment, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to my colleagues. But look, there was a boost at the beginning with 8 million installs, then 2, 3, 4 million, and now they are maintaining around 1 to 1.5 million. I think this is because they bought a cheap audience and just settled on a plateau, maintaining the game within a certain budget that keeps them at a positive ROAS since they had a peak. Well, notice how short the peak is, Zoryana.
Well, yeah.
It kind of took off in a way, lasted literally a couple of days. Then they probably really added creatives there, where it was actually probably in December 2021. It also showed a good picture and then settled on a plateau. They didn't push it with budget or force because they probably exceeded the CPI due to the many different mechanics in the game. It targeted a highly competitive niche, which likely resulted in a high CPI. I like that the game has a clearly defined gameplay loop. The player first buys tomatoes, then starts catching animals, places them in cages, they are immediately bought. The player collects money and buys tomatoes again, and so on.
So it's a very active gameplay loop where the player constantly needs to move from point to point and do something. He doesn't have time to think. He quickly does everything and just out of habit, without thinking, repeats the same action in a loop. This gradually brings him some kind of boost, like more money, new animals, the ability to catch new animals, more machines, and so on. But what bothered me the most is that the project, in my opinion, lacks proper working monetization. The player isn't interested in watching rewards scattered around the area because they already have plenty of money. And that's why I think we have such a large number of interstitial ads, and they appear very frequently. And because of this, a chain reaction occurs. The player doesn't watch the rewards, so we add a lot of interstitial ads. The player sees many interstitial ads, gets annoyed, and eventually drops the game. Again, another reason is that we have very little content, so the game can be completed in 15-20 minutes at most. And in principle, this is what needs to be worked on. And there is also, well, it's not a problem, rather, an area that needs work is scaling, because right now we have 8 animals So the entire goal of the player is to unlock a new animal, collect money to unlock another animal. Thus, when the player reaches the last animal, their gameplay essentially ends. This needs to be developed further or scaled horizontally, meaning adding new mechanics. For example, when the player has almost collected all the animals, a new mechanic or action could be unlocked for them to perform. He starts, for example, collecting animal eggs, meat, wool, or something else, and then he begins to transport and process it. This way, we extend the gameplay. Alternatively, we can expand it internally, meaning the player doesn't just collect chickens and then move on to collecting cats. Instead, he collects chickens one by one, then needs to gather more chickens to fill several cages. To do this, he needs a better gun, more tomatoes, and increased character capacity to carry more. We keep the player engaged for a while, and at some point, when the player can move on to the next animal, he needs to buy a new weapon. Some new machines which will be of blue color, so to speak. It is definitely worth the money, meaning he first has to invest in some resource that he will indeed use. While simultaneously gathering previous animals, only then move to a new habitat zone for new animals, a new range. Thus, we also extend this cycle, making it longer. Additionally, since the player needs to buy more new plants, new cells, and so on, they will have higher expenses and a greater need for new sources of income. He will need to watch rewards to get more money and speed up his process. Therefore, he will be interested in seeing the rewards, and we can reduce the number of interstitials so they don't irritate the player much and he doesn't drop the game. Well, overall, yes, there are still certain balance issues in the game, like, well, for instance, it's a minor thing really, but a player can only carry 5 animals, so what's the point of allowing them to take 8 tomatoes? I mean, they never use 3 of them. I mean, really, what's the point? And the same situation with the boxes where they grow. Why have so many if the player can only take 8 anyway? Well, I mean, it's such a very small and insignificant trifle, but it really seems indeed excessive. That's kind of my honest opinion about the game.
There's a great game called Hogwarts Legacy. Well, it's great for Harry Potter fans. In this game, for example, my wife and I completely divided our responsibilities and roles. I was walking, taking down all sorts of spiders, kicking all sorts of goblins and poachers. She was raising Pushishka and Boltrushaika.
She managed a menagerie, basically.
Absolutely. These puffskeins and diricals are the names. You can breed them, craft with them, take care of them, and all that. So the idea is pretty cool. What needs to be changed? First, we need to rethink the whole concept. Why are we catching them in the first place? To sell, great. The controls are terrible. They should be replaced with something more adequate. Second, I don't understand why we need to collect tomatoes. I know where this tomato came from. It came from assets on the Unity Asset Store because someone once tried to make a clone of my mini-mart, and there are exactly the same tomatoes. I don't understand why we need to take a tomato and charge some device. This device came from similar types of games. At the time when my mini-mart was popular, there was a lot of hyper-cache where you had to vacuum something in such a sector. Cubes, something else. Tomato, charging it into some
very lovable machine.
Wunderwaffe, and running around with this Wunderwaffe catching some small creatures, right? Accordingly, I really like the concept and the idea itself, and to be honest, I would completely rework it from a conceptual standpoint, not just catching and capturing, but also taking care of them. So in short, the idea is okay, but the implementation is not actually.
If we speak in this particular vein about, well, catching and so on and so forth, then I understand that some kind of level or tier gradation is needed. That is to ensure a smooth and steady progression. You need to overlay this progression with some resources that allow you to catch these creatures. And you either make these resources or buy them with the money you get from selling animals at the fair. Well, I don't know. I don't like the concept of selling because essentially you sell and then what? It's kind of unclear, but maybe something like breeding and creating your own separate menagerie as a meta. Regarding animals and what to do with them, There is a game on Steam, a roguelike with a small meta called Sheep Control. I don't remember its English name. If anyone has played it, you have definitely seen that you manage these sheep you get, assigning them tasks. But I think this is already moving towards strategy. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, overall, my first impression of the game is as follows. When I opened the game, I went through this short tutorial with arrows. And overall, the simplicity and intuitiveness of the gameplay quickly drew me in. But in the game, there is only one location, and all the cells for different types of animals are in this one location. So, we have a content limitation which quickly leads to a feeling of uniformity and a lack of content. Plus, the interstitial ads are shown at such a speed that it's like a machine gun belt. I can't keep up with playing. Interstitials continuously and frequently manifest at some random, unexpected, and inconvenient instance, severely interrupting gameplay and causing significant annoyance. Overall, there's also a problem with the lack of a long-term process. One location, that's it. It would be nice to have more locations, for example, one for each type of animal. For example, a tropical island could have some exclusive birds, the Arctic could have polar bears, and space could have some cosmic alien creatures running around. Plus, the upgrade and progression system is very weak. The player plants tomatoes and can expand the garden, but over time there are more tomatoes than needed. And perhaps it would be nice to introduce various different types of fruits and vegetables for different kinds of animals, such as, for example, adjust the balance of vegetable maturation time so that we can add some boosters. For example, if there's a shortage of tomatoes, watch a reward, introduce some upgrades. For example, increasing the number of cells, the amount of vegetables that can be carried, and speeding up vegetable maturation. All these upgrades could be sold for ads, and it would make much more sense and be more enjoyable from a gameplay experience perspective. Here's an additional mechanic. It would be possible to add some unique animals to the cages. Well, in fact, we are currently collecting any animals, putting them all in cages, and getting money for it. But I would like to add some kind of perhaps real multi-levelness. Add a boss or some rare animals at the end that you ultimately need to collect. Allow the player to build various new structures. For example, ores to collect fish, and then use this fish, for instance, to catch bears or some rare large animals. That is, well, a method that can be quite effective and useful. There is room for adding new mechanics. We can expand the farm area, adding new structures and animals, so the player continuously repeats the gameplay cycle. Right now we have 8 cells, and after I open the 8 cells, the game ends. What to do next? Just keep collecting the same animals, constantly watching ads to earn money. But there's absolutely no point in it. I mean, I finished the game, let's say in 10 minutes, reached the highest level, and then it seems that all goals and tasks have been completed. It would be possible to add the gear table, then overall we could base it on how much money has been earned in total and at least have some competitive element. Regarding ads, the frequency of ads is really terrible. It would be better to reduce the number of entities and get boosters for rewards. Right now the reward just lies somewhere on the map, you accidentally run into it and you don't really need it. Money is in surplus, so the balance needs to be adjusted. What's the point of money if it's constantly being earned? So let's give something more valuable for rewards. Unlock a new location, new characters, something like that.
What I'm saying is that I like the concept of the game, the idea itself, but the implementation is not good. Therefore, it might be worth taking the concept and reworking it in a more detailed manner. Actually, when you think about it, everything essentially boils down to this fundamental point, It's crucial, because to fix what you listed at this very specific level of fixing things is essentially akin to releasing an entirely brand new game altogether.
Well, basically, yes, there are things that can be improved. For example, adding sounds, some kind of user feedback, because right now only the gun shoots and it sounds terrible. There are no sounds from the animals, no sounds for balance updates, catching an animal, throwing it into a cage, I don't know, it just runs around, barks, yelps. There's a lack of this, and it would be nice to have a more lively atmosphere. This is missing. And overall, the concept of the game, I later realized, is essentially like buyers taking the animals. I initially thought they were being taken for sausage by some employees. It's a terrible game overall. So, well, overall, I just didn't understand this. I mean, I look, aha, we put animals in cages, then they are taken away. That's it, they're gone. I feel sorry for them. I don't want to play this at all. But if these animals were then decorated with bows and released back, and I got some upgrades on the map, it would be more fun. I would be catching, I don't know, cats with bows and collecting these cats.
Let's talk about the target audience. The concept you're talking about now, with bows and returning animals. Who would it be more oriented towards?
We need to look at it overall. Maybe the cat would come back bigger and then we would catch a fat cat. The audience doesn't really matter here, but it definitely needs to be played out somehow because it initially gave me negative emotions. I thought, wow, what a strange game.
Yes, any frustration is definitely negative, and moreover, it does not lead to any increase in retention 100%. Absolutely. Therefore, from what you and Oleg said, as you mentioned earlier, I can conclude that we have an interesting idea with these types of animals and how it can be played out, but we don't have a game specifically in the idle genre and thoroughly in the idle genre specifically. And improving it essentially means creating a completely new game from scratch, which requires significant effort and resources. Therefore, I don't know if it makes sense to bother with turning a square into a circle now, or turning a square into a pyramid, as both tasks are equally complex and time-consuming. Instead of essentially taking the idea and fundamentally creating a new concept, that's just how I would put it in essence.
One last question. I might be wrong, but how common is it in idle games that if we have ad monetization, I just turn off the internet and play without ads? I think this should be addressed as well.
This is a common problem, and it's solved quite simply. When you turn off the internet, you can only pass one level or perform one action that got cached, and after that, you get a notification saying, "Sorry, guys."
Yes, I later literally had 2 more advertisements and that's all. Actually, in fact. And then I played calmly without ads, which clearly has a direct impact on revenue. This can be a starting point. It doesn't require reworking the game concepts. It can simply be added as a project feature.
Colleagues, I would like to ask a very important question. Our game is called Idle Pet Shop, right? So where is the idle aspect? What is idle? Game designers, please tell me, what is idle as such?
Well, I might not formulate the term correctly, but the essence of idle is mainly that you perform the same simple actions, the simplest actions, and repeat them in a loop, in my understanding.
Yes, a short gameplay cycle, as simple and intuitive as possible. The player should have the opportunity for continuous cycle repetition and constant progression, collecting bricks, stacking them, collecting, stacking, and so on in a loop.
Well, I've heard a slightly different definition. Maybe Denis can guide me. Idle. How does idle differ from tycoon? If we say that both idle and tycoon games are more or less the same, the main feature of these games is that you have to, well, you need to earn income from offline sources too. And after some time, you have to return to the game online periodically for it to keep working and to ensure continuous progress. And here there is no idle time allowed. That is, yes, absolutely right. The first short game cycle is done quite well. I have no major complaints about it. Well, there are questions about advertising and so on. But in order to take the next step, you have to essentially employ a weirdo for money, who will do it worse than you, but he will do it himself. And for some time you yourself have to move to the next location where you will deal with tropical animals, exotic animals, fish. So you just set it up there, simply fired up the first location, and basically put bots in there that do all of it, essentially. You went on to dig into the next locations. And you still enjoy and profit from the first locations, and you start working with your hands in the second location. This is the essence of a classic AILA. Well, colleagues, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, in general, everything is correct. That is, idle is essentially when the player is inactive but continues their game, and inactivity can be considered as an interruption of their actions. That is, they leave the location for a while, but the actions in this location continue to occur, such as grass growing that needs to be collected, customers continuing to go to the cash register, all these nuances. And certainly, yes, even when the player definitely exits or, well, actually minimizes the game, processes continue to occur. That is indeed the essence of Altera.
So let's think about recommendations that we give ourselves. First, add the second and third locations, but it is essential to add idle elements to them. That is, hire this person at some point in time who will slowly and expensively transport these animals himself. The second person who would need to be engaged twice as much, and the third, and so on, effectively and efficiently. Next, the capacity of this idle should be approximately 1,000 or 2,000 coins. After that, once you've earned 2,000 coins, you can't do anything further, meaning offline. You need to come back to the game and spend them. And this is exactly what the conditional push modification should target. When you set it up, dude, at level 5, the maximum is 1,000 coins. That's it. You have 1,000 coins. Earned it. Go do something.
Well, I generally agree, yes. That's how it should work. Ideally, we need to increase the amount of content in the game, add new locations, expand somehow, and yes, rework the acquisition of animals, so to speak, and add these employees, workers for each element the player interacts with. So, one will grow tomatoes there in the garden, the second will carefully carry these tomatoes from one cell to another cell, then to another cell, and so on in a systematic manner, and then we will eventually scale this process to other locations. Gradually, the player will earn money outside the game, come back, spend it, and stay for a while longer. Then leave again, get something again. Thus, yes, in addition to this, I think some mechanics, some features, how they work, need to be reworked a bit, because they can be made better. There was even a point about the grass. Denis mentioned that it would be much more productive if the player did not collect tomatoes, but had a separate field with grass where they would grow grass. They go plant the grass, then harvest the grass, then bring it, place the grass, and the animals they collect eat it. So, in this way, we slightly extend this cycle, but at the same time, the player always has some action to perform.
Well, in a sense, it just adds narrativity to the game.
Well, yes, but instead of just simply picking a tomato and shooting with the tomato, he first goes to the field, plants something like it, yes, then harvests it, brings it back, and for example, each animal will have its own unique type of grass.
But still, we remain in the concept that everything we are discussing now is a new game.
Well, yes.
Because reworking the current project takes significantly more time and is extremely costly in resources than taking an initial idea, a well-thought-out concept at the moment, and making something entirely different and innovative out of it. Therefore, Oleg, I believe it is not worth the time and resources and effort we will spend on it, only to gain nothing in return, in my honest opinion, ultimately, in the end. The only thing we will lose by doing something new is the active audience that is already engaged and currently participating and involved.
There is no audience. You have to understand that. The whole point is that there is already a ready-made engine, yes, and there are some ready-made skins based on it, so we don't have the task to redo it, right? There is a ready-made engine, I mean, not like Unity, but a game engine that already works and does something. You just have to add a lot of additional things to it. probably reworking it rather than writing it from scratch.
No, it's essentially writing it. Just look at how much so-called reuse exists in many games that are similar to each other. You take a certain mechanic, change the camera, and you have the same textures. Did you make a new game? Yes, because you have a different view, and that can change the gameplay. Did you spend any development on new resources for this? Not really. I mean some visual things, textures, and so on. Therefore,
Well, yes, if we stay within the framework of this particular game, there isn't much you can do without leaving it as it is. Here, you definitely need to work on the balance because there is an excess of these tomatoes and money. You can test the amount of advertising, showing it more or less frequently, because in my opinion, it's a bit too much. You need to find the golden mean. Overall, that's it, and everything else, yes, can be developed endlessly. You can go into character personalization and many other things. But the main problem is the amount of content. If there is no new content, new locations, the player, well, they won't have anything to play with. Even with the current amount of content, the surplus in resource balance, and a lot of advertising, it's just not enough. So, if we adjust these three sliders a bit, set up this equalizer, we can already get more out of it. And of course, we can add new locations. Where will we get them from? If we have assets, okay. We can just shuffle these animals and that's fine.
either buy assets or invest.
Yes. Purchase of assets, how much? $50, $200, $500. If this, we will stock up on these assets brim.
My verdict is that I agree then with Maxim regarding trying to do what is possible within the current framework. But not to spend more resources, but rather to take the concept of this game, take everything that is there, and try to do it as the guys described, with more logical moves.
Friends, viewers, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the videos, and if possible, share the videos somewhere online in your program channels anywhere and help show these and other videos to other guys who are developing games. That's the first thing. And the second thing I really want to say is leave comments, your questions, your opinions. It's very important to us. Let's not forget that it is important to note that all the data we see is provided by AppMagic, and anyone can access this data. In the video link under the description, there is a link for 3 days of real free access. Often 3 days are enough to understand whether it is worth working with such data, percentages and so on in general. Don't forget to check out the data on AppMagic and subscribe to us, like the videos. Friends, thank you. This episode turned out to be somewhat spontaneous, but I hope it is interesting and not the last. Bye-bye.